Welcome to another edition of the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Johnny Gadamowitz, Ethan Frank with you. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by Brian Benedict, broadcaster for Notre Dame with the ACC Network. Brian, how's it going? Thanks so much for coming on.
I'm doing well, Johnny. I appreciate you guys having me. How are you doing?
I'm great. We're glad to have you. Ready to talk some Orange and Irish, two ACC teams that haven't gotten out to the best of starts in conference play, at least, but we'll get to that. You know, Brian, you look at Notre Dame right now, the year as a whole, a team that was oh so close to making it back to championship weekend last year. They lose to Maryland in overtime in just a heartbreaking affair. But you look at this year, just a 2-4 record for the Irish. They've lost 4 of their last 5. In your opinion, what's sort of gone wrong for Notre Dame this year, and what's sort of the overall state of the program right now?
Sure. Well, you referenced last season too, which, you know, a phenomenal year, a very complete team they had, right, from all the way to the face-off X to offensively to even defensively. And I know a few of those guys, especially at face-off, had to head out. They were grad students, so they graduated for Notre Dame. And then this year, I have a couple new guys there with Will Lynch at the faceoff X, and then a couple of new guys on the defensive end. But, you know, for Notre Dame this season, I'd say they're extremely athletic and they're extremely talented. You watch them play and you could just see it. What is similar, I would say, to last year is not only are they deep, but they've lost tough games and against some tough opponents too. So last year, their 4 losses were at a total of 5 goals. So very close games last season. And then this year, pretty similar, where the Georgetown game, you know, lost, I think it was 4 or 5 goal game there, but the other 3 were pretty close. So I say that where it seems to be the team is just, you know, continuing to work together to get into rhythm. But the talent and the athleticism is there for them to be a threat, not just going into ACC play, but even the end of the year.
When you hear Notre Dame lacrosse, the first word that comes to my mind is Kavanaugh. I mean, every year it feels like there's a new Kavanaugh coming through Kevin Corrigan's program. So what makes the Kavanaughs so special?
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people have different, you know, thoughts, or it could be consistent, but different adjectives or ways to describe them. But, you know, from my perspective, they're hungry, they're athletic, they give everything almost in every play, right? So not only have you seen them produce offensively this year with Pat leading and, you know, goals, assists, and then his brother Chris being up there with goals, but both of them are up there to cause turnovers for the team. You know, they ride like heck after a save's been made, or if it's gone wide and haven't backed it up. So it's really just the full complete player of not just offensively dodging and scoring and feeding, but they're aggressive, and that kind of stuff can be contagious for either other attackmen or teammates overall.
Yeah, Pat and Chris each leading the way with 11 goals apiece. That leads the Irish. Brian, I want to circle back to something that you mentioned a few moments ago, and just the losses that this Notre Dame team has had to endure with from last year. You lose the ACC Defensive Player of the Year in Jack Keelty. No more Kyle Thornton either. And then you lost really your top 2 face-off guys last year, and Kyle Gallagher, Charlie Leonard off to the PLL. So you talk about 2 crucial positions, not just at the face-off dot, but really a defensive line starting in its entirety outside of a player or 2 that is definitely a bit younger. How have you seen some of these guys? I know you alluded to Will Lynch before. How have they taken stepping into those big shoes and really being impact players after maybe last year you had the sure things, but now those guys are out the door?
Sure. And that's a great question too. I'll start on the defensive side, which you referenced, where you know, you have Cohen returning, who's been a starter since he's gotten to Notre Dame, picking up guys as a grad transfer. So you also have Jason Reynolds, who came from Richmond. So he's a seasoned guy who's been doing well, especially with causing turnovers. You know, Cochran has played well. And then obviously with a new starter coming up the last game with Matt Douglas, he stepped into the role, who's also a grad student. So I say all that where they're still seasoned defensively, right? It isn't a freshman or sophomore who's stepping in as much. Seasoned guys, and then Entenmann in the net coming back as a junior who's doing well too. So I think that unit is just still performing well, you know, 10 goals a game. So it's nothing absurd or too many goals. letting up. So they're playing sound and still playing together. Face-off wise, it's continually, growth and progress there too. Will Lynch has a lot of potential, just a freshman. And he's the guy who's taken over, and, he's done already better from the beginning of this year and moving into the recent games. And then as a unit, as a whole, you guys like Boyer on the wing, some of the shorts D middies there. I'd say face-off wise, just as Lynch continues to grow and as, the face-off guys play together as a unit, trying to get back to what they maybe were last year or just continue to grow on that aspect of the game.
I guess building that chemistry is tough when you've had a schedule like Notre Dame has had. You look at all their losses, like you and Johnny were both mentioning before, they're only 2-4. So do you think Notre Dame is better than their 2-4 record, or did they deserve to lose all those games to, the Georgetowns, the Virginias, the Ohio States of the world?
Got it. Yeah. I don't know about deserve, let's say, but I'd say, and I'm biased obviously when it comes to that too, but from my perspective, they really are athletic and they really are that good. 7 of the 8 goal scorers from last year have returned, right? So there's only one guy that left on the offensive front. I think from that end, those games outside of, what we touched on, some of the face-off situations there, but scoring and putting the ball in the back of the net is one thing where they're out shooting their opponents. And it's just something like, all right, let's just have that placement, right? Let's just make sure we're accurate. We're getting the opportunities. We're getting the shots there. So just finding that back of the net would help maybe in a 1 or 2 goal game, like Maryland from earlier this year, but going into ACC play, continuing to make sure that offense is not just producing the shots, but now burying those shots is going to be important.
I feel like so often you talk about the big 3 and, all the top teams in the nation sort of have it, a triple threat. You look at Notre Dame, and we mentioned the Kavanaughs and everything that they do in their own right. But, in a perfect world, Brian, it seems like there hasn't really been, and correct me if I'm wrong, there hasn't really been that sure thing number 3. I mean, Wheaton Gadamowitz is a guy that's certainly in that conversation as well. But in your eyes, is it a sustainable formula to kind of have the Kavanaughs leading the charge and then everyone else? Or as I mentioned before, in a perfect world, does someone step up and become that go-to to sort of complete that trio?
Yeah, and that's a good question. You kind of have to see with, Chris being a freshman, right, this year, new to the team, building that chemistry again. You had a guy like Griffin Westland sharing some time there at attack. And then on the midi front, we're pretty deep where even though you mentioned Gadamowitz and, Dobson and Meyer on that first line, Will Angrick, who's a freshman, is stepping up. So I say where I don't know if it's the model is necessarily the sense to look, is it sustainable them two and someone else? And big 3 is common in a lot of sports, right? We see it in basketball for sure. But I say that where the way both Kavanaughs play, that is going to set the tone for not just the attack unit, midi unit. And I think as far as a third, let's say, leading goal scorer or key contributor, there's just a few other guys that will step up at different times to play that role. So I don't know if that answers directly it there, but I just view it where both the Kavanaughs are, look, just like their brother Matt and their family overall as athletes, they're talented and they're effective, and it's only going to be good for Notre Dame to have guys like that around.
So moving from offense to defense, Syracuse has one of, if not the hottest player in the country right now in Tucker Dordovic. Who on the Notre Dame defense can slow him down, and how do they do it?
Yeah, well, he has been going off for sure this season. And, if you're looking at how you want to play it, I think it really just comes down to seeing from an LSM perspective, you have a guy like Boyer who could step in. And then on the defensive side with 3 long poles, you could always rotate who's going to have them. And then if you want to slide quickly or how you're going to play to a guy like that off the ball, I'm unfortunately not a part of the staff to give you the key on what the game plan will be. But ideally there, you'd want to make sure you just pressure him at all times, stay on his hands for sure, right? Even if you're not going to completely disrupt the shot, make him realize there's presence and there's someone there who's on him. A long pole obviously is effective doing that just because they have a little bit of an advantage. But, if there's a short stick that's caught on him, just have the slide come quick and be able to help out. So, from my perspective, there's a few different ways, but he's also, killing it right now. So we'll see.
You look at last year when these two teams went head to head, and fair to say the Irish had their way with the Orange, beat them twice, 18-11 in the Dome, 22-8 in South Bend. But you look at Syracuse this year and what's changed from last year, obviously a whole new coaching staff and a little bit of a new look sort of threat. Dordovic moving up to attack as compared to midfield last year. So can you really draw too much off of those previous two matchups? Is Notre Dame rolling into this one with momentum on its side, knowing that they took care of business last year? Or from your perspective, has it sort of been that wipe the slate clean, especially when you go against a team that's got a new coaching staff?
Sure. And you probably helped me with finishing off of that part of the question, but it very much is like new team, new year type of mentality and a new game. And, you know, especially each game, things can change for teams, right? And they can continue to grow. And so obviously you guys coming off a big win with Duke coming into this week, that's getting some momentum, not just overall in the season, but ACC play as well. And then, you know, Notre Dame having a tough one there against Virginia. I think it's just a new slate. And from Notre Dame's perspective, this is a game that now ACC play, I think, 5 of the 6 remaining games are in conference. So a win like this is huge, right? You guys are 1-1 in the ACC there. At least you got a W there. So Notre Dame's end, getting a win here would be big. And then momentum building too, as the rest of the year continues to go. But on that same end, you know, for you guys coming off a Duke win, having that momentum, I'm sure the team, and you guys can let me know as well, but how's the team as far as the energy, the culture, and then as they're preparing for this weekend's game too?
Well, that Tucker Dordovic goal that went between the legs on Saturday, people are describing it as a culture shifter, playing lacrosse the way that Gary Gait wants them to play. I think Johnny would back me up on that and it completely changed the momentum of that game. And when you see a team playing with that much confidence, I think it might instill a little bit of fear in the opponent because Duke didn't score for the final, double-digit minutes of the game after that goal. So I wouldn't expect Tucker to try something like that on the road. It seems like kind of a goal that we would be reserved for the Dome, but you never know. But another aspect of the game as well, we were talking about face-offs before, and Jacob Fopp has been excellent for Syracuse so far this season. You mentioned Will Lynch and, what Notre Dame lost and what they have now, but Fopp's been right around, 58%, upper echelon of the country. How do you see that matchup playing out on Saturday?
Yeah, we'll see the one-on-one matchup just to see how they, each face-off guy can be different, right? So even though obviously he's been doing well this year too, if Lynch has a way to match up for him that's unique, great. Or if you rotate who's in there, like Hagstrom for us as well. That'll work too. But I think faceoff's always just the unit entirely, right? I mean, you guys know too, with having the wing play involved and how you're able to not just win the clamp, but then distribute the ball to your teammates. So I say that where, look at that one-on-one matchup first, but at the end of the day, it's a unit. And so making sure all 3 guys are doing what they need to do to really help limit the amount of face-off, wins, let's say, that you guys have. So to that end, though, one thing that, for Notre Dame that has been good is even if the face-off wasn't, top 5 like it was last season, they're still having close games. So that's the end of it that's the idea of where making sure that game, that part of the field is limited. Try to get as 50-50 as possible, will help. But, if there's a talented guy, like you guys have too, it puts you in a tough position to play more defense and try to get more of those stops.
I want to hit on Liam Entenmann, as close to a sure thing as you can have in net. And he's been doing his thing in South Bend for quite some time now. His numbers, at least so far this year, compared to last season, have dipped a little bit. Nothing too catastrophic, but he saved 59% of shots last year. He's down to 53 this year, but still one of the best goalkeepers in the nation. What have you sort of seen from him? How has he just evolved and grown during his time on campus?
Yeah, and that's actually a really good question too. And so from my perspective, I've at least had a chance to call about 3 or 4 men's games over the past 5 seasons plus. So I say that where I've seen him, freshman year to now, and then being a leader for sure is up there, right? What was nice about, Entenmann stepping into the net is there was a pretty seasoned defensive unit in front of him. And that helps, when you're young and having that defensive unit there. to, especially last season, being the starter, playing the whole year, to teach you, different things on being a leader or to help you grow. This season in particular, though, the way, Liam Enton's been able to bounce back from, let's say, certain deficits during the game. You look at Georgetown, even though that was still a loss, the halftime deficit was, I think, 9-2 or around there, where it didn't let him affect him too much in the second half, where he came out, playing well and firing. So he's still able to, mentally stay strong and not lose that confidence, even if teams go on a run. And as you guys know, lacrosse is a game of runs. So on that end, I mean, as a leader, for sure, vocally, and then just his confidence, you could tell in the net there, not to necessarily get rattled. And, with his save percentage and how he executes, we're lucky to have him for sure.
So I've got a bit of a fun question or questions here for you. I got a couple of fill in the blanks, a little two-parter action. So the first one is Notre Dame wins because what?
All right, there you go. For me, I think it's still, for Notre Dame specifically, finding the back of the net and finding those right shooting spaces. And man up, they're effective with it for sure. Offensively, again, not worried about producing the shots or getting the shots. When you have leaders like both the Kavanaughs there at attack or then our starting midi line, the shots will come. It's all right. Let's find the back of the net now.
And then the same for Syracuse. Syracuse will win if they do what?
Continue to be effective at the face-off X for sure. And then, seeing if we can have any stop to some of your guys there too, especially with the momentum they've been having. That's probably it. And I think also for you guys, separate from just, that, it's another athletic and very talented team, Syracuse, right? We know they've been good for, years and years, but, even their record, I would say, similar to Notre Dame, I think they're better than what the record might show on the athleticism and talent they have on the team. It's now just producing some of those wins too.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it. Syracuse and Notre Dame this Saturday. You can catch it, as always, on WAER, 2 p.m., opening face-off with a 1:30 countdown to face-off. That's going to do it for this edition of the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Be sure to check us out wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. We post all our video interview content there. So be sure, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Give us a dislike if you like. Hey, I hope not. But we want you to be brutally honest. And if that's what it's going to take for the interaction, then feel free, be our guest. Well, and maybe I just invited a little too much of that, Ethan. I don't know. We'll have to see. But either way,
don't dislike. It's all
only
likes. All love.
Only likes. Yeah.
Yeah. But for Ethan, Frank, and Brian Benedict, I'm Johnny Gadamowitz. SU and Notre Dame coming up this weekend. Should be a lot of fun, and we'll talk to you next week.